Destiny 2, the game that costs, well, nothing now. Bungie's new flagship product is one of the strangest releases in modern memory, especially given that it has now lived two very distinct lives of different costs. Since Destiny's launch, and more particularly Destiny 2's, I've been critical of how Activision has handled Destiny 2 and Bungie's seeming shift in how they approach their games. The Jekyll and Hyde of the gaming industry, but all it took was a developer being free of their proverbial gag order to see right through the thin veil that was hiding squandered talent in the clash between artistic and monetary differences. For a while, Destiny looked like it may be a tale of warning for both gamers and developers alike. And yet today, the tide has turned. The money-chasing Destiny that we all knew is now dead. That version of the game died along with a failed partnership that just may change how developers and publishers approach AAA games. Today we're going to look at how Destiny became one of the most denigrated products in the modern gaming industry, and then how it slowly recovered from that. How it got to where it is today, and most importantly, why you should care beyond just the fact that this is a free-to-play game now. Why Destiny might actually be a beacon of hope within the AAA industry. But to start at the beginning means starting at a low point.
I'm back. Still don't know why you left.
10 years. 10 years and 4 damn games. That was the publishing deal that Bungie agreed to nearly a decade ago. For what game? That game was codenamed Project Tiger. How did we even find out about this game? Well, that should have been the first telling red flag. The contract came to light during discovery of a lawsuit as Vince Zampella sued Activision after the publishers screwed him and he went off to create what would become Titanfall. It's here where we learned that Project Tiger was a franchise of games that, despite being published by Activision, would be owned by Bungie. This would become Destiny. The problem started right here. In the contract, there will be two realities. The first is that Activision will be plugging $500 million or more into the franchise, essentially setting up Destiny to be in an immediate cash cow or die situation. That type of financial pressure would rear its ugly head in one of the contractual clauses. It's reported that Activision required Bungie to release one Destiny game each and every year, including large $40 expansions that could potentially be packaged as a standalone. Essentially, they wanted to annualize Destiny. These are things like The Taken King and even Forsaken. So they started building, and it went poorly. See, Bungie's executives were now at the mercy of Activision. They had to please their publisher or risk funding and time running dry. So when Jason Jones went and pitched a story for Destiny that players could walk their way through at their pace with a refined mission structure, well, things went south. So with just a year until release, the game's story was essentially scrapped and redone in an effort to open the game up more and try to create more of a blanket replayability. The story is a microcosm of what befell Destiny 1. The game would release in 2014 and the damage to the franchise would immediately begin to be done.
I have already put down the deposit. Do you understand how a deposit works?
Mike, I am not having fire eaters in a paper warehouse.
It's casino night.
Destiny 1 was so very clearly pushed out too soon, so very clearly lacking direction, that the only thing selling the game at launch was that it had two companies really trying to sell the game at launch. The original Destiny was a series of poor decisions made one after the other that sullied the potential of something that underneath it all was pretty damn good. Bungie nailed the feel of the game, unsurprisingly. It sounded great, it had some of the smoothest FPS mechanics this gen, and it looked spectacular. All of this is to say it had a superb foundation, which makes it a shame that they insisted on burying it under a bunch of crap. What became clear immediately is Destiny was a game Bungie wasn't prepared to make under the conditions Activision presented them with. As already mentioned, the team at Bungie essentially remade the game in just over a year, scrapping most of what they had already created from a narrative and even environmental standpoint. Destiny was originally being built to be much wider in scope and scale than what was released. That version of Destiny wasn't going to be done in time, and that created an issue. So instead, Destiny released as an empty cocoon that had long since been vacated. There was essentially no story at all. No real in-game narrative pushing players through the presented content. Most of this was meant to be there, but was instead shelved and placed in card form that one could go read on the internet. Better yet, once players got through the quote-unquote narrative, they were greeted with a nearly empty endgame in a sense of, well, what the hell do I do now? Over time, things would change for the original Destiny. DLC would expand the game and, more importantly, create some reasonably substantial endgame content. Destiny would end up being a sort of trial for what Bungie could do with the game. A free pass for being the first attempt at really this kind of shooter on consoles in general. But then, these two companies would lose sight in ways that their community simply did not deserve. The next shot fired into Destiny was greed and insanity.
I got insanity practice. Pinwheels in my head, voices, angry fish!
How's he doing?
Not good. He still thinks this is practice.
You know how you can tell Activision had a massive influence over Bungie with Destiny 2? Because the game's release date showed a game made by marketing teams instead of game makers. Game makers look to make their games better, fix the mistakes of previous entries. Marketers look to stay still in positions of low-risk profit. Destiny 2 almost unbelievably repeated the exact same cycle as the first game. Reports came in swiftly midway through development. Bungie once again, this time with Destiny 2, scrapped a huge portion of the game and was forced to entirely rebuild again. Why? The reports were clear. The game needed to be built more around and more focused on microtransactions and post-launch monetization. Now, regardless of whether or not this part is true, regardless of whether or not the game was scrapped and rebuilt simply for the sake of monetization, the mid-development reboot that saw direction of the game taken over by the director of The Taken King showed like a hair on Tommy Pickle's head when the game came out. Once again, the game launched and it was made for the wrong people. Instead of fostering the community, the game was built to appeal more to casual crowds, more to the COD player, and thus the grind was all but gone. Gear scores, Grimoire scores, endgame again, all but non-existent. And Bungie let it fester, not fixing the problem for almost half a year. Destiny 2, much like the original, played amazing, was beautiful, and this time even had an interesting story to tell. But again, the foundation was not what was built out upon. Later, with the launch of Forsaken, the game would become not just good, but phenomenal. Destiny 2, as it stands today with all expansions at your disposal, is nothing short of incredible, even with its problems. Forsaken, and even some earlier updates, course-corrected the problems with Destiny 2. There was a bigger issue that even the most forgetful of us simply couldn't shake. See, the game was losing players rapidly early in the life of Destiny 2, its reputation tanking, but more importantly, Bungie's reputation took the biggest hit. As the game festered in a state of what seemed once again to be incompletion, other problems, other unforced errors began to show their heads. For this one, we're once again taking a page out of another Murdered Of.
I'll ask you one more time. Are you sure you didn't eat anything in my factory?
No.
I'm just asking.
What are you, calling me a liar?
No, I'm just saying.
Hey, shut up, Wonka.
And it has a name on the back. A Doover.
That doesn't say Doover, that says do-over.
The future of Destiny isn't as clearly bright as some fans have immediately painted it to be. Most internal discussion points to the fact that many of Destiny's problematic decisions were in-house Bungie decisions that they themselves brought to Activision and weren't forced to make or implement. But that's a bit disingenuous, and also ignores a bit of the reality of the situation. Yes, it does appear to be true that things like the deceitful XP throttles and poor communication were squarely on the shoulders of Bungie. But it's hard to believe or even imagine that they would be engaging in these practices if they didn't have Activision breathing down their necks. If they didn't feel an absurd amount of pressure to make an equally absurd amount of money. It's hard to imagine they would have felt the need to annualize the game the way they have, and in the process engage in actions that attempt to manipulate their consumers into purchases. That doesn't make them free of implication, but it needs to be noted because now they found themselves in a different position, but surprisingly similar position. Now Bungie plans on self-publishing Destiny. Even with a $100 million stipend, Bungie now will have to figure out how to publish on their own while still making enough money to be able to market the game, advertise for it, show it, and budget in ways that they have not had to do before, even going as far back as their time working with Microsoft. But they have one massive thing working in their favor that Activision and Microsoft simply cannot provide them: community. As much flack as Destiny has taken for 5 years, there is no denying that the Destiny community, the core of these games, is phenomenal. They have stuck through the pains, the problems, the seeming disregard for their sanctity, and have kept Destiny relevant, kept it enjoyable to jump into, kept it interesting in a way that so few communities manage to do. I may not be a part of that hardcore community, but I could fill an entire video with stories of that community and my interactions with its members and still have more to say. The point? Bungie isn't starting from scratch. They aren't fighting a losing battle. They have a foundation most franchises never see, and that alone should give everyone hope for what Destiny can become. But Bungie, you have to foster it and treat it with respect. So why should you care about Destiny 2 in 2019? It's simple. Bungie is basically handing it to you. But you probably already know that, so I'm not going to bore you with the details of the free-to-play release or the expansion dropping along with it. Instead, I want to talk about why that's even more important than just, hey, free game. I'm not going to sit here and ask you to play Destiny 2 simply because it's free, but I want to acknowledge the importance of precedence here. Bungie had a raw deal with Activision. They made a mistake, but instead of waiting until their internal combustion was complete, lying in wait until Activision swallowed them whole, they fought back. They didn't settle for a new status quo of consumer manipulation, they bet on themselves. Bungie's a developer that's ready to take the risk on a massive endeavor, and not every studio is Bungie, I know that, and not every studio has a Destiny on their hands. But if the game succeeds from a few days from now when it launches free to play and on, it may create a new path for developers to do it on their own, or at least understand and avoid less than conducive publisher relationships. By doing what Bungie is doing here, by becoming a more independent version of themselves, they are, for lack of a better in-industry comparison, the Chance the Rapper of games. A large, menacing force that's threatening to disrupt the big business of people who do next to nothing but profit off of the art and talent of the people that actually make the final product. Now, games are not music. They require significantly more financial investment and time, but maybe, just maybe, studios like BioWare don't need EA as much as people think. And yes, EA owns them, but what if there was an avenue for independence? Destiny and Bungie are in a unique circumstance, with prestige and a huge product, but I'm hopeful that should Destiny continue to succeed, that maybe we'll see more of our favorite developers bet on themselves and avoid the Activisions, the EAs, and the sharks of the gaming industry. Let's be really clear here, Destiny, even as it stands today, underneath all the daddy issues, is a great game. In fact, it's arguable that it's one of the best games you can get your hands on this gen. It has a phenomenal community and one that has supported it through its absolute worst and into its newer highs. But Destiny 2 has a chance to be so much more than what it is. Without the pressure to cram in microtransactions needlessly, without the pressure to annualize, without the pressure to meet arbitrary publisher-set deadlines, Bungie will finally have the chance to just be Bungie. A game developer that has built maybe the 2 biggest FPS empires on the planet, not named Call of Duty. And now, it will essentially, as hard as it is to comprehend, have an indie game on their hands and be an indie studio. A self-published product that no one gets their hands on outside of the people that love and want the absolute best for the game. A game that can finally be made by game makers as opposed to game sellers. And that distinction cannot be more important. So what really happened the day that Activision and Bungie's Destiny died? A rebirth. A fresh slate. That's what happened. While the Destiny we all know is now dead, the Destiny that could be is finally going to get its chance to live. That is it for today's video, guys, and as always, I want to know what you think. Are you going to play Destiny now that it's free to play? Are you interested at all? Are you worried at all about the fact that they're going to have to continue to make money, even though the game is kind of free to play? Are you hoping that just the expansions will be the way they bring in that revenue? But most importantly, I know Bungie has stipends and things like that, but what studio do you want to see attempt to become more independent, or as independent as Bungie has made themselves? Is it BioWare? Is it somebody else? Or is it some other entity? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, press that like button. If you are not yet subscribed, also press the subscribe button. Make sure you don't miss anything from this channel. Also importantly, press the little bell next to the subscribe button. That just makes sure you won't miss anything. You'll actually be notified when videos come out, which is a huge deal on this platform because otherwise you may never know. So press subscribe and the little bell. The reason I'm on camera in front of you right now is because I just kind of want to give you guys an update of where this channel's at. I like to do this every once in a while, but mostly because, you know, I was just gone for 2 months. As you guys can see, you know, I'm just back to basics, making the mini doc content, that more highly edited stuff, just things I really like. I really just want this channel to be a place where you can come and hear about the things you love, hear about the games you love, maybe the games you don't love, and just be a place where you can, you know, kind of get that information while being entertained, listening to some good music, just kind of a place to chill out. You know, the news stuff was kind of high energy and all over the place, and you may get some new stuff here and there, but it won't be like it was. It'll be like this stuff. It'll be this highly edited, almost mini doc stuff. You know, I'm kind of moving away from that. I know some of you like that, and some of you have relayed that to me, but it's just not the content I love making. And so this kind of laid back, just kind of listen to some good music, find out about new games, old games, whatever it is. That's what this channel is going to be. So if you're here for that, stick around. There'll be more of that. And yes, before I even get the comments, I know Gears of War. I know. Yeah. Until next time, guys, I'm out.